Nobody expected this. When Caitlin Clark entered the WNBA, everyone expected excitement. Analysts predicted sold-out arenas, record-breaking television ratings, and a wave of new fans. They expected a talented rookie who could help grow the league over time. But what nobody expected was how quickly one player would force the entire league to change. Within months, every Indiana Fever game became a national event. Television networks began moving games into premium broadcast windows. Ticket prices skyrocketed. Arenas that once struggled to fill seats suddenly had fans lining up hours before tip-off. Sports shows that rarely mentioned the WNBA were now opening segments with Caitlin Clark. Even people who had never watched a women's basketball game before suddenly had opinions about the league. That kind of attention doesn't happen often in sports, and when it does, it changes everything. But here's the part that makes this story different. Usually, when a league grows, the conversation stays focused on the game itself. Fans talk about championships, rivalries, and great performances. With Caitlin Clark, the conversation became something much bigger. Every hard foul became a headline. Every referee decision became a national debate. Every post-game interview turned into social media content. Every clip spread across the internet within minutes, bringing millions of people into conversations that previously belonged only to dedicated basketball fans. The WNBA wasn't just gaining viewers. It was becoming part of mainstream culture in a way it had never experienced before. Growth sounds exciting, but growth also creates pressure. Suddenly, every mistake feels bigger. Every controversial whistle gets replayed from 10 different angles. Every missed call becomes evidence for someone's argument. Fans who only started watching because of Caitlin Clark began questioning officiating standards, player safety, media coverage, and even the league's overall direction. The spotlight became so intense that the discussion often moved beyond basketball itself. Instead of asking who played the better game, people started asking whether the league was protecting its biggest star, whether physical play had gone too far, and whether the WNBA was truly prepared for this level of public attention. That brings us to one of the most revealing moments of the season. NBA Commissioner Adam Silver publicly acknowledged that Caitlin Clark had unfairly become what he called a political football. Think about that for a second. The commissioner of the NBA wasn't being asked about the NBA Finals. He wasn't discussing free agency or television contracts. He was answering questions about a player in the WNBA. That alone tells you how large this story has become. When the head of the NBA feels compelled to address the conversation surrounding a WNBA player, it means the impact has expanded far beyond one league. It has become part of the broader sports landscape. And that's exactly why this video isn't about one foul, one game, or one controversial moment. Those stories come and go. This story is different. It's about what happens when one athlete accelerates the evolution of an entire league. Caitlin Clark didn't just bring more fans into arenas. She brought more cameras, more expectations, more criticism, and more scrutiny than the WNBA has ever had to manage before. Every decision now carries greater consequences because millions of new viewers are paying attention. That's exciting for the future of the league, but it's also forcing the WNBA to answer questions it never had to answer before. For years, the league focused on steady, long-term growth. Build the fan base slowly. Increase television exposure gradually. Develop new stars over time. Caitlin Clark changed that timeline almost overnight. Instead of gradual growth, the league experienced an explosion of attention. Instead of quietly building momentum, it suddenly found itself at the center of national sports conversations every single week. That kind of rapid change creates opportunities, but it also exposes weaknesses. Systems that worked for a smaller audience suddenly face pressure from millions of new viewers who expect the same level of consistency they see in the biggest professional leagues. And that's the real story. The biggest change isn't Caitlin Clark herself. It's what her presence has revealed about the WNBA. The league is no longer operating in the same environment it did just a few years ago. Expectations have changed. The audience has changed. The media landscape has changed. The business opportunities have changed. And now the league has to decide whether it can evolve quickly enough to match the moment that Caitlin Clark has created. If the only thing Caitlin Clark had changed was television ratings, this story would already be remarkable. But that's not what happened. She didn't just increase interest in the WNBA, she completely changed the business environment surrounding it. Every successful sports league depends on one simple equation. More viewers create more advertising revenue. More advertising revenue attracts larger television contracts. Bigger television contracts increase league income, which eventually improves player salaries, facilities, marketing, and long-term investment. That cycle normally takes years to build. Caitlin Clark accelerated it in months. Before her arrival, many regular-season WNBA games received limited national attention outside dedicated basketball audiences. Suddenly, Indiana Fever games became must-watch television. Networks adjusted schedules. Broadcasters highlighted Fever matchups in prime windows. Sports debate shows that rarely mentioned women's basketball were now discussing WNBA storylines almost every day. Even people who disagreed about Caitlin Clark were still talking about her, and in the media business, attention is valuable regardless of which side people support. Every conversation generated clicks. Every highlight generated views. Every controversy generated another news cycle. That constant attention kept the league in front of audiences that had never followed it before. The impact inside arenas became even more obvious. Cities across the league began reporting packed crowds whenever Indiana visited. Visiting teams benefited from increased ticket demand simply because Caitlin Clark was on the schedule. Fans weren't only buying tickets to support the Fever. Many wanted to witness the phenomenon for themselves. Some came to cheer for Clark. Others came hoping to see another team shut her down. But from a business perspective, the motivation didn't matter. The seats were filled either way. Concession sales increased. Merchandise moved faster. Local media covered games with greater urgency. For franchises across the league, Caitlin Clark wasn't just another opponent. She became one of the biggest attractions on the calendar. That's when expectations began changing as well. New fans don't arrive with years of patience or deep knowledge of league history. They compare what they're watching to every other major sport they consume. They expect clear officiating. They expect professional broadcasts. They expect consistent scheduling. They expect instant replay to work efficiently. They expect transparency when controversial decisions happen. Those expectations existed long before Caitlin Clark, but the size of the audience watching those moments multiplied dramatically. Suddenly, issues that might have remained small league discussions were becoming national sports stories within hours. This is where the challenge for the WNBA truly begins. Growth is exciting, but growth exposes every weakness. Imagine opening a neighborhood restaurant that suddenly receives 10 times more customers overnight. The food might still be excellent, but if the kitchen isn't prepared for the volume, delays appear, mistakes become more visible, customers become frustrated. The success itself creates new problems. That's exactly what rapid growth can do to a sports league. Systems designed for one level of attention suddenly face expectations from a much larger audience. Another important shift happened in the way players themselves were viewed. Before Caitlin Clark entered the league, many great WNBA players were primarily recognized by dedicated basketball fans. Today, individual personalities receive far greater national exposure. Players like Sophie Cunningham, Aja Wilson, Breanna Stewart, Nafisa Collier, Angel Reese, and others now find themselves discussed by audiences far beyond traditional WNBA circles. Every rivalry becomes larger. Every friendship becomes a storyline. Every emotional moment receives millions of views online. The league's stars are no longer performing only for arena crowds. They're performing in front of an audience that follows every interaction through social media, television, podcasts, and sports talk shows. That level of visibility creates opportunities that simply didn't exist before. Sponsors become more interested. Brands recognize the value of attaching themselves to athletes whose highlights consistently dominate sports conversations. Television executives begin seeing stronger commercial potential. Young athletes watching from home suddenly view the WNBA differently because they see players becoming mainstream sports figures rather than niche celebrities. These are long-term changes that extend well beyond one season or one rookie class. But with every opportunity comes another responsibility. The league can't celebrate record attention while pretending the pressure hasn't increased. Every major sports organization eventually reaches a moment where popularity forces evolution. Rules become stricter. Broadcasting improves. Officiating standards receive greater scrutiny. Communication becomes faster and more transparent because millions of fans now expect answers. The WNBA has entered that phase. It didn't choose the timing. The audience chose it. And much of that audience arrived because of Caitlin Clark. That's why reducing this story to one player misses the bigger picture. The real transformation isn't simply that Caitlin Clark became a superstar. The transformation is that her popularity accelerated the business evolution of an entire league. She didn't create every challenge the WNBA faces today. She simply brought those challenges into the brightest spotlight the league has ever experienced. And once that spotlight turns on, it never becomes easier. It only becomes brighter. This is where the conversation changes completely. If Caitlin Clark were simply putting up impressive numbers every night, the league would be celebrating a successful rookie becoming a superstar. But that's not what's happening. Instead, nearly every major story surrounding Clark quickly expands into something much larger than basketball itself. A hard foul isn't discussed as just another physical play. It immediately becomes a debate about player safety. A controversial whistle isn't simply questioned by fans watching the game. It becomes the subject of national sports television, podcasts, and social media. Even post-game interviews often generate headlines that last longer than the game itself. That doesn't happen because people suddenly care more about officiating. It happens because Caitlin Clark has become the player through whom millions of casual fans experience the WNBA for the very first time. Think about how unusual that really is. Most leagues spend years introducing new audiences to their sport. The WNBA found itself introducing millions of new viewers almost overnight. Those viewers don't arrive with years of context. They don't know every rivalry. They don't understand every unwritten rule. Instead, they judge what they see in real time. If Clark gets knocked to the floor, they ask whether the foul was necessary. If officials don't make an immediate call, they wonder whether the referees missed something important. If the league later reviews the play, many fans ask why it wasn't handled correctly in the first place. Fair or unfair, those questions become part of the league's public image. That's exactly why player safety has become one of the biggest discussions surrounding this new era. Basketball has always been a physical game. Every great player has taken hard hits. Every superstar has dealt with defenders trying to disrupt rhythm and confidence. Caitlin Clark isn't unique because she gets fouled. She's unique because every foul involving her is watched by an audience much larger than the league has ever experienced before. The same play that might once have been discussed only by dedicated basketball fans now reaches millions of people who immediately begin forming opinions. Some believe officials are doing their jobs. Others believe Clark isn't being protected enough. Still others argue she's receiving more attention than any other player. The debate itself becomes bigger than the original play. This is why Adam Silver's comments carried so much weight. When he said Caitlin Clark had unfairly become a political football, he wasn't suggesting that every criticism of the league was invalid. He was pointing out that Clark's name is now being used in conversations that extend far beyond basketball. Different groups see her as representing different ideas. Some view her as the future of the league. Others see her as proof that women's basketball has reached a new level of popularity. Some focus on officiating. Others focus on media coverage. Others argue about physical play. The result is that one athlete ends up standing at the center of dozens of completely different conversations at the same time. Few players in modern sports have experienced that kind of pressure so early in their professional careers. Another reason these stories continue growing is because they now involve personalities, not just performances. Fans don't simply follow the scoreboard anymore. They follow relationships. They notice which teammates defend each other. They pay attention to body language after hard fouls. They watch who steps in during heated moments and who stays silent. That's one reason Sophie Cunningham has become such an important figure in the public conversation. On the court, she's known as a competitive player who isn't afraid of physical basketball. Off the court, many fans have started viewing her as someone willing to stand beside Clark when games become emotional or tense. Whether that perception is completely accurate isn't really the point. In sports, public perception often becomes part of the story itself. The interesting part is that this attention benefits the entire league, not just one player. Sophie Cunningham receives more national attention because more people are watching Indiana Fever games. Opposing stars gain more exposure because they're playing against Clark in nationally discussed matchups. Television networks promote these games more aggressively because they know audiences will watch. Sponsors see larger opportunities because engagement continues growing. In other words, even controversy creates visibility, and visibility is one of the most valuable currencies in professional sports. But visibility also creates enormous pressure on the league's leadership. Every response now matters. Every disciplinary decision is examined. Every referee explanation is analyzed frame by frame. Fans no longer accept vague answers because they compare the WNBA with every other major professional league they watch. Expectations have risen dramatically, and those expectations aren't going away. That's why the WNBA finds itself in a unique position. It finally has the national attention it spent years trying to earn. But now it must prove it can consistently operate under that spotlight. And that's the biggest challenge of the Caitlin Clark era. The league is no longer judged only by the quality of its basketball. It's judged by how well it manages success itself. Can it communicate clearly? Can it protect the integrity of the game? Can it handle controversy without allowing every discussion to spiral into a larger cultural argument? Those questions didn't suddenly appear because Caitlin Clark entered the league. They were always there. She simply brought enough attention to make sure everyone started asking them. The biggest mistake anyone can make right now is believing this is the peak of the Caitlin Clark era. It isn't. If anything, the league is still experiencing the very beginning of what could become the most important period in its modern history. Every major professional sports league eventually reaches a turning point where one athlete permanently changes public perception. Before Michael Jordan, the NBA looked very different. Before Tiger Woods, golf reached a much smaller audience. Before Stephen Curry, few people imagined an entire generation would build its game around three-point shooting. Those athletes didn't simply become stars. They forced their sports to evolve. The WNBA now finds itself standing at a very similar crossroads. The challenge isn't creating more interest anymore. That part has already happened. The challenge is keeping that interest alive for years rather than months. Casual fans may arrive because of one superstar, but they stay because they believe the league offers compelling competition, memorable rivalries, and a professional product worth investing their time in. That means the WNBA can't rely on Caitlin Clark alone. The league must use this unprecedented attention to elevate every franchise, every major player, and every important storyline. When new fans tune in for Caitlin Clark, they should also leave knowing who Asha Wilson is. They should recognize Nafisa Collier, Breanna Stewart, Sabrina Ionescu, Angel Reese, Sophie Cunningham, and the many other stars helping shape the future of women's basketball. That's how sustainable growth is built. The league also faces another opportunity that many people overlook. More viewers don't just create larger audiences, they create better business conditions. Television partners become willing to invest more money. Corporate sponsors become more aggressive. Young athletes begin viewing professional women's basketball differently because they see a realistic path toward national recognition. Future draft classes may become even stronger because the next generation is growing up watching sold-out arenas and nationally televised games instead of wondering whether women's basketball receives enough attention. That's how one superstar can influence the sport long after her own career ends. At the same time, the WNBA cannot ignore the lessons this moment has exposed. Transparency matters more than ever. Communication matters more than ever. Every controversial officiating decision, every disciplinary ruling, and every major public statement now reaches millions of people within minutes. Fans don't expect perfection, but they do expect consistency. They want to believe that every player competes under the same standards, and that the league responds clearly when difficult situations arise. As the audience continues growing, that expectation will only become stronger. There's also an important lesson for the players themselves. Increased popularity changes the responsibilities that come with being a professional athlete. Every interview, every reaction, and every on-court interaction now carries greater weight because more people are watching than ever before. Rivalries become larger, friendships become storylines, Competitive moments become viral clips, viewed by millions around the world. That level of visibility can feel overwhelming, but it's also a sign of success. It means people genuinely care about what happens inside the WNBA, and that wasn't always the case. Perhaps the most impressive part of this entire transformation is how quickly it happened. Sports leagues usually spend decades building toward moments like this. The WNBA experienced an explosion of attention in an incredibly short period of time. That kind of rapid growth naturally creates growing pains. Systems need to improve. Broadcasting continues evolving. Officiating faces greater scrutiny. League communication becomes more important than ever. None of these challenges should be viewed as signs of failure. They're signs that the league has reached a level of relevance where every decision now matters to millions of people. And that's why Adam Silver's comments resonated so strongly. Whether fans agreed with every word he said wasn't really the most important point. The important point was that one of the most influential figures in basketball felt it necessary to publicly address the conversation surrounding Caitlin Clark. That alone demonstrates how dramatically the landscape has changed. The WNBA is no longer operating on the edge of mainstream sports coverage. It has become part of it. Every major storyline now receives national attention, and that changes the expectations placed upon everyone involved. So, when people ask whether Caitlin Clark has changed the WNBA, the answer is no. She has done something even bigger. She has changed the expectations surrounding the WNBA. Fans now expect sold-out arenas. They expect national broadcasts. They expect transparency from league officials. They expect rivalries that feel meaningful. They expect stars whose names are recognized far beyond basketball circles. Those expectations didn't exist at this scale just a short time ago. Now they define the league's future. Years from now, historians may look back at this period and realize that the biggest story wasn't a single rookie season, a single controversial foul, or a single viral highlight. The biggest story was that women's professional basketball entered a completely new era. Caitlin Clark didn't create every opportunity the WNBA has today, and she didn't create every challenge either. But she accelerated both faster than almost anyone imagined possible. That's why the title of this video matters. The WNBA didn't expect Caitlin Clark to change this much. Because in the end, the biggest transformation wasn't about one player changing a league. It was about one player forcing an entire sport to think bigger than it ever had before. Fade to black.